Testing, testing. Oh, yes, Samantha. Ooh, it popped up. Okay, good.
What? Okay.
This little interim inspector general thing. So this is what the live stream looks like.
Thanks.
Okay.
And that's on YouTube?
Yeah.
Great.
I mute it.
Testing, testing. Awesome. Okay, that's great.
Test. Ding, 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 ding. Oh, that worked. Good afternoon, fellow COC members. And to all the members of the public who have joined us, today is Thursday, June 13th, 2024. Welcome to the United to House LA Citizens Oversight Committee. It is now 2:32. And we have a packed agenda, and out of respect for our hosts, the MWB, and also for your time, we hope to adjourn this regular meeting before 5:30. Before roll call, please afford me a few housekeeping comments. Speaker cards from members of the public who wish to speak during public comment. If you haven't already done so, please take a public speaker card, fill it out, and hand it to one of the LAHD staff. Where are you, LAHD staff? There we go. And if you are joining the meeting virtually and would like to make a public comment, please refer to the instructions on the agenda on how to place yourself in the virtual queue. Speaker time. As always, we welcome and encourage public comment, as your voice is vital in how we shape our policies and direction. Thank you all for your commitment, and we want everyone to be heard. However, to ensure that the committee has ample time to vet and deliberate the issues on today's agenda, we request the following. If members of a group or organization are going to be repeating the same message, please consider picking one or two folks to communicate that message so that we end up with as much time as possible to discuss, among other things, your points. We want and need to hear from you, but we need to move forward with the work of ULA, and I ask you all to work with me to help make sure we can do that. Speaking time will be limited to 2 minutes per speaker. Translation. Today, we will be utilizing simultaneous interpretation to prevent interruptions to our speakers. If anyone in the audience needs or requires Spanish language interpretation for this meeting, please notify LAHD staff to obtain a headset. Those who are in person but do not speak Spanish will also need a headset for English interpretation. For those on Zoom that require interpretation, please select the appropriate language interpretation using the globe-shaped interpretation button, but only when you require it. Otherwise, please tune in to the main audio channel. For example, if you are in the Spanish language interpretation channel and there is a public comment in Spanish, You will need to switch to the main audio to hear it in Spanish and vice versa. Right. Roll call. I'll ask the city attorney, Mei Chen. Thank you for joining us today to please take roll.
Councilman Coulter.
Here.
Vice Chair Greenlee.
Here.
Committee Member Saya. Committee Member Chen.
Here.
Committee Member Gaeta. Committee Member Jones.
Here.
Committee Member Lipa.
Here.
Committee Member Mendez Limas.
Here.
Committee Member Morales. Committee Member Raymond.
Here.
Committee Member Reed.
Here.
Committee Member Sanchez.
Here.
Committee Member Sharma. We have 8 members here, so Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you so much. We will now take item number 3, public comment. Again, thank you to those of you who have joined us and wish to speak. Speak. Go ahead.
Should I call them up?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we have one speaker who's presented a speaker card, Mr. Jackson Loop.
Is it on?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me, the ULA COC. My name is Jackson Loop. I am the policy manager at SCAMF and the chair of the policy committee for the United to House LA Coalition. I wanted to comment briefly on item number 7. You will be getting a presentation from LHD today on LHD's draft expenditure plan for the next few years for ULA funding. We discussed that briefly at the policy committee today. And I just want to put into the air in this space that there are a few reservations among the coalition about zeroing out the short-term emergency assistance bucket. We recognize that we agreed to truing up, so to speak, of the balances. We don't have any consensus about what to do. We don't really know how much money is needed to sustain the program. We don't know where that money would come from, but I do want to just express that here to allow you all to discuss that today. There is also a feeling that there is a lot of political momentum around the short-term emergency assistance program. Council really likes it, so we're a little concerned about halting it there. And there was also one other thing expressed, which is the program is really distinct. And if the funding is completely cut off, it could cause some more delays whenever the money comes back, as the program would have to like ramp up again to get the money out the door. So there's just some concerns there. We're going to chew on a little more. We're going to discuss it again over the next couple of weeks. And I encourage you all to do the same today. Thanks.
I'm going to ask, does anybody have any speaker or would you like to speak? Public comment, right? Public comment, yes.
We do have two speakers online and a few more signing up. So
Okay.
may I call the ones online?
Absolutely.
Okay, Yvonne Martinez Watson.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Yvonne Martinez Watson. I am the chair of the Angeles chapters of the Sierra Club's Environmental and Social Justice Committee. I'm also the chair of the State Sierra Club California Environmental and Social Justice Committee. I'm here today representing Sierra Club. We are an endorser of Measure ULA and a supporter of the ULA coalition. I'm here to ask you to please support what is going to be said today by the coalition. We at the Sierra Club are very concerned about another seriously hot summer that's on the horizon, and our most vulnerable citizens still need help. We are asking you to please expedite the hiring of staff positions needed to implement all the Measure ULA programs, and to please just continue to work the work of this committee. We really thank you for what you're doing, and we thank you for taking care of the people who really need us right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next speaker, Ali Camille.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ale Campillo, and I'm with the Koreatown Immigrant Workers Alliance. We're a member of the ACT LA Coalition and the ULA Coalition. And I'm here really today to encourage the COC to recommend the City Council that this program requires permanent affordability and resident governance and emphasizes new construction. We feel very strongly that the alternative model for permanent affordable housing is a critical opportunity to keep people housed and prevent homelessness. Kiwa ourselves has partnered with the Little Tokyo Service Center to actually develop an affordable housing project here in Koreatown. And we provide tenant services as a CBO that further betters the experience of tenants, all the while connecting those tenants and the community to other services as well. And we hope that other community orgs can be able to do that in the future. Social housing in Los Angeles has the potential to fundamentally transform the relationship between residents and our housing. I've seen it here myself, and I think it can be done and re-territorialized throughout the city in different ways to meet the different needs of the city at large. So we encourage the COC to help achieve the goals of Measure ULA and recommend to the City Council that this social housing program provides permanent affordability. And lastly, I just want to echo Jackson's sentiments that revising the budget allocations is definitely something that we are also would be in favor of. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, Eva Garcia.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Eva García y estoy en el apoyo para que se implemente el modelo alternativo de la vivienda social, ya que para mí es algo más allá de una vivienda asequible, la cual estamos viviendo actualmente no está realmente para nuestras comunidades y nuestra comunidad necesita vivir dignamente en una vivienda donde no siga sintiendo ese acoso aún bajo una vivienda asequible. Entonces, una vivienda social para mí es la visión y misión que nuestra comunidad necesita vivir dignamente, donde sientan un lugar seguro y queremos una vivienda social asequible de por vida, donde podremos sentir esa seguridad de estar en nuestras casas. Entonces, yo quiero como comunidad, en nombre de mi comunidad, pedirles por favor que se luchó por la medida ULA y ahora que se haga seguir los pasos, que ese recurso sea realmente para lo que nuestra comunidad necesita, porque fue un voto democrático y de mucha lucha y que ahora necesitamos una vivienda social digna en Los Ángeles para toda nuestra comunidad.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Joe Donlin.
Hey, good afternoon. Joe Donlin with United to House LA Coalition. And I wanted to share back a little bit from some of the conversations the coalition has been having. The Citizens Oversight Committee has, joined us in our efforts to advocate with the city council and with the mayor to ensure that ULA dollars could be spent even while litigation challenging ULA remains in the appeals process. And even after the budget hearings culminated a couple weeks ago, there was still some lack of clarity. And I wanted to make sure to report back what we've learned from those conversations. We spoke with Deputy Mayor Matt Hale. We spoke with the City Administrative Officer Matt Zabo. We spoke just on Tuesday with Council President Paul Krikorian. And a number of other council offices. And in all occasions, they all confirmed that ULA revenues that were approved in the city budget, which equaled cash on hand plus $25 million projected for the month of June, can be spent while litigation is pending. And they all confirmed that the 15 positions that the housing department and the city attorney together have for the protections from tenant harassment to enforce the Tahoe ordinance are also able to be filled without any sort of delay. And so I want to make sure that this body was aware of that so that as you're considering your expenditure plan here today and thinking about the programs going forward, that we have confidence, and as we talk with the members of the city family, that we have confidence that they're going to be able to implement these programs and utilize these dollars fully going forward. And so in that context, we ask that implementation happen as quickly as possible. It's been mentioned that there's been a number of programs that still are not yet off the ground fully. There's capacity building dollars that haven't been released yet. There's, of course, we're waiting for the income support program to be able to move through council. And those Tahoe positions are really key. So we just ask that you help in that effort to make sure that the implementation moves forward as quickly as possible, as I think we all would like to see. So thank you.
Joe, who were the council persons with whom you spoke? You listed the names, I just didn't catch it.
Directly on this issue, we spoke with Council President Krikorian himself and staff at Councilmember Blumenfeld, Lee's office, Park's office, and Raman's office. And I think in the case of Parks, you know, their staff were less familiar with kind of the ins and outs, but in most all the other conversations they were clear on, yes, that's our understanding that ULA dollars can be spent while litigation is pending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to call up Noe Herrera.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I think I want to speak Spanish because, okay. Hola, mi nombre es Noé Herrera. Soy miembro de Trust South LA y miembro de la coalición UHLA, United to House LA. Estoy aquí hoy para alertar la COC a recomendar al Consejo Municipal que el programa de modelos alternativos requiere asociaciones formales entre organizaciones comunitarias y desarrolladores en las pautas del programa Modelos Alternativos para Viviendas Asequibles Permanentes de la ULA. Es fundamental para crear hogares que combatan el desplazamiento para siempre. I feel so happy and proud to be one of the residents of the Trust South LA Vecinos 23, because otherwise I don't know if I would make it today, because the rent is being out of control everywhere, but where I live, I mean, I think I'm okay. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Rosa Perez. And then I'd like to call up after Rosa, Orisela Alfaro.
And before you start, can we make sure that anybody who needs that, my headset works just fine. But who needs a headset?
Anybody, do you need one?
Yes.
Anybody else want to?
Thank you for sharing.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Rosita Pérez, soy miembro de South LA y miembro de la coalición ULA, Unit to House LA. Y estoy en apoyo en otras organizaciones también. Estoy aquí hoy para alentar al COC a recomendar al Consejo Municipal que el programa de modelos alternativos requiere asociaciones formales entre organizaciones comunitarias y desarrolladoras en las pautas del programa Modelos Alternativos para Viviendas Accesibles Permanentes de la ULA. Es fundamental para crear hogares que combatan el desplazamiento para siempre. Siendo parte de la mesa directiva de Trust South LA para fortalecer las relaciones entre Trust South LA y los inquilinos. Muchas gracias.
So Ms. Alfaro.
Muy buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Graciela Alfaro, soy miembro de Trust ULA y miembro de la coalición ULA y otras organizaciones relevantes. Estoy aquí para brindar mi apoyo a las pautas del programa bajo protección contra el acoso de inquilinos, defensa contra el desalojo y educación para inquilinos. Se trata de programas fundamentales que ayudarán a evitar que las personas más vulnerables se queden sin hogar. Esperamos que nos den su cooperación, por favor, y su ayuda, que lo necesitamos mucho. Gracias.
That concludes the speakers we have. Oh, is there one more? So we have Yvonne Figueroa, who is joining us via remotely. Did she hear us? Yvonne, can you hear us? Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. I didn't see the unmute button. Greetings, everyone. My name is Yvonne Figueroa. I am the Director of Organizing at LA Voice, also part of United to House LA Coalition. And I would like to ask this committee to pass the guidelines recommended by the coalition. And also, we really need to make sure that we're spending the money and speeding up the implementation now that we know that we can use the money. In particular, there are 15 job positions that need to be filled to really implement the anti-harassment tenant program. And so we really want to urge this committee to play a leadership role in helping fill that out. And we're happy to support in that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our public comment. We don't have any more speakers lined up.
Great. Thank you all. So that closes item number 3. And we're now moving on to item number 4, which is the COC Chair's Report. And I would like to commend Councilmember Hernandez, Rahman, and Harris Dawson for including a motion on May 28th, 2024 to direct LAHD with relevant community-based organizations to identify strategic financing tools that support and achieve the ULA goals for permanent affordability and resident governance and social housing. Thank you. And on the Taxpayer Protection and Accountability Act, I actually don't have any updates today. So that concludes my report. Moving on, so that's closing item 4. Do I need to say that? All right. And we're opening up item number 5, which is the Interim Inspector General's report. I now invite the team. I'm not sure who is leading on this. Richard, take it away.
Thank you, Chairperson. So 2 things to report. The first is just following up on our last meeting regarding the 2 vacant seats for the Citizen Oversight Committee. So the Interim Inspector General team is posted on the COC member nomination forms. Those are posted on the website, and you'll see a QR code up there. Seat number 7, a renter protection and support representative, and seat number 15, a youth representative, are both open. The deadlines to nominate a potential member to the committee are June 28th for seat number 15 for the renter protection and support representative, and June 14th for seat 7, the youth representative. And I'll turn it over to Cecilia on actions from the last meeting.
Yeah, I just want to note, particularly given public comment, that I think it's just yesterday, our team transmitted to the city council and to LAHD a notification announcing the motion that was adopted at the last COC meeting. It was a motion by Vice Chair Greenlee, seconded by Member Raymond, related to the expenditure, recommending to the city council that they authorize in the mayor's budget or in the adopted budget the full $405 million of revenue that was projected in the mayor's budget, but actually allocate it for ULA expenditure and implementation. Second, that as money is collected, it should be expended. And third, to unfreeze the 15 positions that have been allocated to LEHD by the Civil Service Commission to implement ULA. So this body acted at its last meeting. We've transmitted notification of that motion, adopted motion to LHD and asking them to forward that to LA City Council. So I just wanted to underscore that. Thank you.
That closes item number 5. Opening up the LHD report, item number 6. Where the staff of LHD updated us on the revenue and legislative items. And Callie, Greg, and Edwin.
You good? Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
All right, how's everybody doing? Good afternoon, Greg Good, Director of Strategic Engagement and Policy for the Los Angeles Housing Department. Our update will be brief. I'll jump to it. This is a fancy clicker. So revenue and expenditures. So we got reported revenue for April. It was our best month yet, which is reason for a bit of hoot and holler. We received almost 35 million on 39 transactions. That brings our total for fiscal year 23-24 to $266,987 and $586 and 282 plus for the entirety of the first 2 months in fiscal year 23-24. We should hopefully have, presuming a meeting for the 27th, hopefully we'll have the last month's numbers for that meeting as well. But this is obviously a positive trend the last couple of months. So our budget to actuals in terms of cash out versus allocation hasn't really changed a ton since our last meeting. This is the big picture, which is very difficult to read. So I'm going to the breakdown. But I feel like I need to give the big one as the intro. So on our affordable housing programs, this one's simple. This is the multifamily affordable housing accelerator plus. This is in process. That money is fully committed, but it will still be, most of it is committed, but the cash is still not spent. On homelessness prevention programs, as everyone knows, we still have $11 million in income support for rent burden to at-risk seniors and persons with disabilities. The Eviction Defense and Prevention Program, that is a contract still being essentially finalized, but that is fully committed to extending our contract with Stay Housed LA. And then Tenant Outreach and Education, most of that money is also committed, although the cash is not outlaid yet. And then protections from anti-tenant harassment. This came up in public comment. So there's 3 key pillars, just as a reminder of that program, and we're going to talk about this when we talk about the permanent program guidelines, or the IIG will talk about it when they talk about the permanent program guidelines. But the 3 key pillars are the community-based organization outreach contracts. The scope of work is still being completed there, and that will be turned into an RFP that should be coming out in the fall or issued in the fall. The platform, the technology that is so key to connecting the dots citywide in terms of the complaints and establishing pattern and practice of those complaints is being worked on as we speak, and that is supposed to be ready to go online by the end of the calendar year. And on the positions, are confirmed and agreed. We have heard as well that we have the authority to hire those positions. We only, as a reminder, we have 12. 3 are with the city attorney, but our 12, we have applied, for lack of a better way to put it, or submitted to the PCH, the Prioritized Critical Hiring Committee, and we are waiting for approval there, even though they are they're allocated by the Civil Service Commission. We have the authority to go forward pending approval by the PCH. For those who've been around the city for a couple of decades, it's the artist formerly known as the Managed Hiring Committee. We don't know when that next meeting will be agendized. It is not a regular meeting. We certainly hope it will be agendized, and we look forward to that. But we have taken the steps necessary, and those positions are submitted. We look forward to getting that done.
Greg, can I interrupt you for 1 second? When was that authority finalized? I understood at the last meeting, you didn't have authority to hire.
Well, we still don't, I mean, it's a semantics issue. We still don't have authority to hire because we need the PCH to give us authority to hire, but lots of people will tell you we had the authority to hire pending X, Y, and Z. So depends on your definition of authority. At the last meeting, we were also pending the PCH committee. And so that is the step before we can sort of go into the process. Yeah, okay. And then finally on administration, all of this money is committed, including for the COC budget. This is still just cash that hasn't gone out on admin, et cetera. So lastly, before we go to the expenditure plan, wanted to, on the income support for rent burdened at-risk seniors and persons with disabilities, that was ostensibly, we hoped that would have been scheduled for the June 5th Housing and Homelessness Committee meeting. It was not. The CAO wishes to do a report, and we are working with them on some important issues around it, namely what the implications are for folks with benefits receiving income. And so we will likely come back to y'all with a report on how to navigate that, but it is it's an issue that has come up in thinking in terms of implementation. And so we've met with coalition members, we've met with benefits attorneys, and we're looking to create a scenario basically in which recipients of that income support are either A, not going to be impacted, because if you're receiving benefits, depending on the types of benefits, and admittedly, I'm not a benefits expert, but if you are receiving benefits, depending on what type they are, they could, if not handled very carefully, jeopardize those, well, the income assistance at a certain level could jeopardize those benefits. And so what we want to do is make sure that we're creating a resource for potential participants to be eyes wide open about the implications and get some sort of counseling around how to best make sure that their benefits aren't compromised in any way. So we're working with the CEO, like I say, we're just met with United Way yesterday, talking to council offices and also meeting with benefits lawyers to come up with what we think is going to be a plan to help address that. It is a delay. It's an unfortunate delay. We wanted it to be heard on the 5th, but it was not, and that was taken out of our hands. So, but I do think it's important that we address this piece, and we're going to. All right. So, do we go forward, Madam Chair?
I have a question, or I wanted to make a point.
Please.
So go to the revenue to date page. And as everybody knows, I'm a CPA by background. So in April, should April's number of our revenue received was 34.5 million from transfer taxes. If that were the same number in every month here moving forward, we would be getting $408 million into the program per year. And right, giddy up, exactly, giddy up indeed. So I think the non-conservative estimate, or what we hoped for, was in the 600 range, but then the naysayers came up with half of this number. So, excellent. Excellent to see that momentum.
I would agree. There's been at best a chill and outright fights, right, over this. And still, that's $400 million. And even just, I mean, even just with what is on hand, we're going to be well over $300 million. That's $300 million that doesn't exist to address the issues that we're addressing, but for United House LA and the great work of this committee, the great work of the coalition, the great work of the city council and the mayor and all the folks in the ULA family involved. So I think I agree with you. It's reason to say giddy up, Vice Chair.
Right. Thank you all.
Longhorn.
But yes, okay, so that closed item number 6. Is that what I was hearing you indicate? Okay,
You're
and we're
right, yeah.
moving on to, I'm sorry. Are we taking questions? Should anybody want questions or comments on this? Hearing no questions or comments on item number 6, we're going to close it out and move on to item number 7, which is the fiscal year 24-25 ULA expenditure plan.
Sorry.
LAHD, I think
Okay.
you are up at the podium to give us a brief overview.
Yeah, so I just want to make a quick note that this presentation is provided to the COC, to the audience, to the public, and to the community out there, consistent with the requirements of the ULA measure as an informational item, and no action is being required of you today. Following today's presentation, we will be submitting the expenditure plan to the mayor and to the city council for their approval. Before Callie walks us through the proposed expenditure plan, I'd like to lay out some background context. Some of this is reminder, some of it's just food for thought. First, as the committee is aware, last year, the city council adopted the mayor's proposal to allocate up to $150 million in ULA revenue for 6 expenditure categories for FY 23-24. This created a framework for what some of you have heard me call sort of baby ULA, right? What baby ULA did not do is adhere to the percentages in the measure and the law. The measure and ordinance, as everyone knows, establish 10 program categories and provides very specific allocation percentages that govern how program spending should be distributed across administration and the 10 program areas. Sorry. So, with that, I just blew us up, Callie. As this chart shows, this resulted in these 6 programs being allocated a significantly higher percentage than of ULA revenues than would have otherwise been required or even frankly allowed. This has led to a need, and we've all talked about this. This committee instructed us to go forth and true up. The city council has instructed us to true up. The city attorney has provided very explicit and unequivocal guidance toward that end. It is something that we have to do consistent with the measure. So as directed by all of those bodies, the expenditure plan prepared by LAHD aims to rebalance these program allocations in accordance with the ULA requirements or true up as quickly as possible. Second, in addition to truing up, the mayor and city council have directed LAHD to establish an FY 23 or 24-25 expenditure plan that is based on available cash on hand through June 30, 2024. As shown in this first table on this slide, total ULA cash on hand through June 30th, 2024 is projected to be just over $307 million. This includes an assumed revenue of $25 million for June 2024, the only month for which actual receipts are not available yet. As I mentioned, hopefully we will have those by June 27th and we'll be able to report that in revenue. The $25 million cap was actually codified in motion by Councilmember Hugo Soto Martinez. Hopefully it's more. I suspect it will be more. After subtracting the 150 million in ULA revenues that were already approved and committed through the FY 23-24 expenditure plan, the remaining rollover balance available for the FY 24-25 expenditure plan is anticipated to be $157,541,370. Additionally, given current available information, the department projects expected revenues for the subsequent fiscal years will align with the amount of revenue expected to be collected this fiscal year, a forecast of approximately 291.6 million each year. Now, I want to add a caveat to that. I will be profoundly disappointed if that is our revenue for FY 25-26 or 26-27, as I suspect literally every human and organism in this room will be as well. That said, from a department standpoint, as a department, there's really not much at this point with only 1 year to sort of build a revenue projection on. And that's something we'll be able to do in a much more, I think, just a much more nuanced way moving forward. What we would anticipate is, and will do, is we will continue as revenue is coming in over the course of the next fiscal year, we will continue to report to y'all. And when we, and I won't even say if, but when we see the uptick start to materialize, I suspect there will be a lot of conversation in this room, or maybe not this room, but in this building, as well as other buildings that we all frequent around how to adjust that. But we will have to do the true up. That is not, at least according to every piece of counsel and direction we've gotten, that is required. We make more money, we true up faster, and we'll be able to adjust the programs accordingly. I will note also that monthly collections in 2024, again, have been trending higher, as our chair pointed out. In the event that actual revenues exceed this estimate, the department will revise revenue estimates, as I alluded to. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Callie Hardy, who will walk through the proposed 24-25 expenditure plan along with 26-27, or 25-26, 26-27. After Deepika asks me a question, and Antonio. Excuse me, commissioners.
Okay, so I have two questions before you get into the weeds of the budget. The first is, as you're proposing it with the idea that, for example, like this year, tenant harassment will not be used fully because there's a hiring freeze and you're doing that. So if in the presentation, you can tell me what happens with like excess funds, right?
So with protections from anti-tenant harassment, it is, I mean, you know, it is tricky. And we talked about this way back when we approved the interim guidelines, in that hiring in a blue sky world in the city takes a ton of time. And then with all of the stuff that everyone knows about in terms of the budget, et cetera, it has taken longer. So while the true up does require, because, you know, 3% is allocated in the measure, what we ended up at was almost 11%.
Got it.
And that's that's why it actually zeroes out for 24-25. But the marginally good news is that those humans have not, those jobs have not, you know, started. And so we will be acting. And so even as we're not getting new revenue into it in 24-25, the portal's going to go online. The contracts, which also, that money also hasn't been spent. The CBO contracts will not, it will be realized. And the position. So we don't have to refrain from effectuating what was committed of that $150 million. And in the end, Commissioner, all of that $150 million is going to get spent.
On tenants also being helped, right, by city staff eventually. Like, is hiring, yeah. I see what you mean about the 3%. Maybe Callie will walk me through it.
Yeah.
When she goes over it. And then a second question is, if we want to make an amendment to the budget, how would that happen? Because you're saying you're proposed, like it's going to the mayor, right, after?
Council. Yeah.
No, like, so today, there's an idea, and I raised my hand for myself and Laura, sorry, Antonio, but go ahead, Laura.
Actually, we have a question I think lays sort of certain
foundation.
basis.
Okay.
That I think will lead up to that
Okay,
question.
perfect.
So can
Okay.
we?
We can table that.
we
If you already
table
have
it
a
for-
process, that's fine.
No. Well, I wanted to get your question out because it seems really fundamental to this discussion.
And look, I do apologize if this question has been asked previously. I've been away for a few months, but I just, if I recall correctly, last year, this committee did vote on the expenditure plan, vote to approve the fiscal year 23-24 expenditure plan. I think you mentioned, Greg, that we will not be voting on to approve the 24-25 expenditure plan. Could you walk us through why that is? And I apologize if
No, that's
you're
fine.
repeating yourself.
What we have been told is that the expenditure plan approval is subject to the same process, the same budget process as the city charter. And that is approval by the council and approval by the mayor. What this board did last year was endorse that, endorse the plan that we proposed. We welcome that, but what we're supposed to do is basically submit to y'all and to the council for folks to weigh in. And that's what we have been instructed in terms of the letter of the measure.
Madam Chair, to committee member Sharma's point, so the measure only requires a presentation to you.
Okay.
It does not require your approval or even your
Well,
recommendation.
this is
But it certainly doesn't
That wasn't
mean,
my question.
yeah, no, but I'm just clarifying that it only requires the presentation be done by July 1st.
Got it.
You're welcome to opine on anything you want and submit that to the council, which you have already done. But I just want to underscore, that's why this is a presentation. It's not been agendized for action.
So we do have a change we want to make and propose.
Understood.
So whenever that time is right, I'm asking the chair and you, when would be the time to
Let me
propose
ask,
that?
Antonio, do you have a question that?
Well, it's similar to that. First I was gonna thank Greg because when I saw the 157 million, that was quite confusing. So thank you for addressing that. By when do we have to true up? I missed that. Well, or what fiscal year? Now?
The council from this committee, recall, and I think this was April. This committee instructed us to true up as quickly as possible. The city attorney has also provided guidance. City attorney doesn't instruct us per se, but the city attorney has provided guidance that it would be a not insignificant mistake to not true up as quickly as possible. The city council, in the budget that was just passed, along with a subsequent motion that was also passed, instructed us to true up as quickly as possible in the 24-25 budget. And so that's a lot of people telling us that we should true up. So that's what we set out to do.
So your goal is to true up with the 24-25 budget?
Yes, and because and Callie will walk through in greater detail. The longer that takes, the more precarious, the more frankly, we are out of line with the measure. But also the longer it will take on the back end. I mean, that's just real. It is true that there are significant pain points. There are significant, probably surprises for folks. But if everyone will recall, the allocations in the 23-24 budget were given to us, and we were tasked to accept that. A great example, and I think that the one that is probably most unsettling to folks, including me, including everybody at the LA Housing Department, is short-term emergency assistance. But short-term emergency assistance in 23-24 was provided a 22% allocation. versus the 5% prescribed in the measure. Further example, and again, Callie will walk through some of this, housing production programs are after administration, prescribed, mandated to receive 70%, with homelessness prevention to get 30%. In that 150, housing production was at 41%, right? 41, and homelessness prevention, I think, was at 59. Those are numbers that have to be reconciled at some point, and that's we're not being honest or transparent about the work if we don't attempt to do that as instructed. Don't like it, but it's what it is.
Are you going to go, I'm getting right back to you. Is part of Callie's presentation, a presentation of the specifics of the 24-25 budget? Would it be okay? I feel like that's fine.
It's a process question.
Okay.
And I think it's helpful because we're trying to ask about program stabilization, so go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think it's actually an elegant solution to.
Sorry to interrupt, Laura.
You have to turn on.
Okay, I think it's an elegant solution to both the true up as well as the rental assistance. So we did decide on true up, and it sounds like everyone is aligned, right? Like we need to do this. The program stabilization fund, though, it doesn't seem is part of the budget for next year. So consistent with the true up, I feel we should be funding the program stabilization fund, which was created really to support ongoing programs when they really need funding that's not available in the allocation of like that year. And so the rental assistance would be a perfect candidate for that, right? And our understanding is that the program's up and running. It would actually be a disservice to like the program itself to take a pause like this. It would, there's been all this infrastructure built, staffing, whatnot. And so I would propose we look at truly trilling up, doing the program stabilization fund as well, and kind of allocating that money towards rental assistance.
So we're happy, first of all, your guidance is and input is obviously always invited. So as the starting question, I think Commissioner Sharma asked is like, are we open to hearing stuff? Of course, like that's why we're walking through in as great a detail as we can. We will certainly go back and think through that. I will posit, as uncomfortable as it is, because nobody wants to get money on the street for vulnerable folks any more than the LAHD. That's what we do. That's what we're here for. We're in hard moments and hard times. Anything we pull has to be pulled from someplace. And, we have virtually not enough money in the multifamily affordable housing bucket to do a NOFA. Alt models received no money last year. Acquisition rehab received no money last year. Capacity building, operating assistance, homeownership received no money last year. We still are behind. We can't pull money from protections from anti-tenant harassment, can't pull money from tenant outreach and education, can't pull money from short-term emergency assistance or from eviction defense and prevention. And so that's the wall we walked into in this true up. And so pulling money into the program stabilization fund, Commissioner Raymond, we get it, but it doesn't actually feed the program stabilization fund, which is ostensibly supposed to get to 200 million at some point before, and there's some lack of clarity on what that language actually tells us. But either way, it's really just moving the money over, and it has to come from someplace. And so my only ask of this group would be, and we don't have to do this right here, but if it's going to be pulled from someplace, if you're requesting that we pull it from someplace, one, we're going to need to check with the city attorney, and I think that's in everybody's interest. Two, it would be helpful to have your recommendation also where it would come from, because that is a really hard choice.
Can I just clarify the idea? Yeah, so the idea would be, every year, the program stabilization fund would be capitalized until it gets to that amount, right? So it's it's just overall funding, like it's supposed to be going in there. So I'm not clear on like why it isn't.
Well, we've held up because, so that we could begin to true up at least the other buckets.
Right, but they're supposed to be every year.
I mean, it's,
But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's why would be a true up, is putting money in there to start capitalizing it, which is how right, exactly. Every year, it's part of the allocation. So it should be getting. funded.
quiet kind of.
And rental assistance is 5%, right?
Yes, the same amount.
The reasons I was hoping.
Okay.
I wanted them to go
Okay.
through this,
Okay.
I wasn't there yet.
Okay.
so we'll go through, yeah, for sure.
I think it's
All
good
well
that they
taken.
kept it in mind. I still think it was helpful, Michelle.
Okay, so you all know the indomitable Callie Hardy, who is going to join us now, and now we'll just do our questions.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Callie Hardy with LAHD. So I'll try to hopefully walk through a little bit of how we approach the expenditure planning process, and hopefully that will help answer some of the questions the committee has. So I think as we talked about, the expenditure plan was prepared in line with both the direction of the city council, the mayor, as well as the council of this body and the city attorney. I'm really trying to accomplish a couple key objectives, right? Creating an expenditure plan based on our available cash on hand at the end of this fiscal year, 157 million. As well as doing so in a manner that helps us to true up as quickly as possible. And as I'll kind of talk through, I think one of the really key challenges there is sort of finding a way to true up in acknowledgement that we did really exceed expenditure amounts in certain program categories, and also dramatically underfund certain program categories with this past fiscal year in a way that is possible with a more limited $157 million budget. So I'll just point out, so also in accordance with the requirements of the measure, the expenditure plan that we are presenting does also look ahead at 2 subsequent fiscal years. So this is really a 3-year expenditure plan as required by the measure. And really is looking at what can we do to allocate across all 10 of our program categories. As I think we'll talk about in a little more detail, based on the current revenue forecast that Greg walked us through, there are 4 program categories that are going to be more difficult to true up and will take multiple years of adjustments to get to full true up. But the remainder of the programs under the proposed expenditure plan that is presented would achieve true up with the fiscal year 24-25 expenditure plan. So going ahead and looking at a summary of those true up adjustments for 24-25. So as we've discussed, there are a number of adjustments being made across all of the program categories. There are 3 program categories in particular that would see an increased allocation as they were not funded in this last fiscal year. These are really our production programs, alternative models for permanent affordable housing, ACT rehab, home ownership, capacity building, and operating assistance. All of the other program categories would see a reduced program allocation in some form in this coming fiscal year. And I'll just also note that one area that does not require any adjustment is the administration bucket, which received the appropriate 8% allocation last fiscal year. As I noted, 6 of the programs will be able to be trued up within the fiscal year 24-25 and forward carry over to subsequent years. And I'll just maybe add a note in terms of how we've approached this is really looking, what does it mean to true up? Is really looking cumulatively over, so in the case of 24-25, looking at the 2 expenditure plan years and comparing the total allocation amount that was assigned to a given program compared to the overall expenditure amounts within, the 2 expenditure years. To give an example, totaling the expenditure plan amounts for both fiscal years for multifamily, the multifamily affordable housing program, it would be allocated $63.6 million. And looking at a percentage of the overall 307.5 million ULA revenue that would be allocated between the 2 years. This is equal to 22.5%, and therefore would not require further true-up adjustments. So then looking in a little bit more detail at what we're proposing for 24-25 expenditure plan. This slide is, we've sort of broken them out just for readability. So this is looking first at the admin and then housing production program buckets. And I'll just note on these slides, you'll see these sort of light green highlights, and that's really trying to call out the areas that are being adjusted through a true up adjustment. So again, pretty much every program category needs some adjustment in 24-25. I'll highlight a couple of key takeaways here for 24-25. The multifamily affordable housing program will have a smaller allocation this coming year. So really looking, from a housing production perspective, we would be funding the alt models and acquisition rehab programs as really our primary programs receiving funding in the coming fiscal year. Again, and that's due to the true-up requirements. And then I'll just touch on the program stabilization fund. We did not allocate funds in that program really because we need those funds to be reallocated into the other program buckets to help us accomplish sort of the rebalancing across all of the programs. And so this would be rebalanced in the subsequent fiscal years.
So the numbers here, that means that it's already trued up. I mean, so if, for example, the multifamily affordable housing, if we in 24-25, if we allocate only 4.7%, that means that we are done as far as we caught up with.
That's actually not shown on this slide, but that is correct. Of these ones, the only one that would require further adjustments in subsequent years would be the program stabilization fund.
Program stabilization.
Yes, so all the rest of the production programs complete their true up with 24-25. Okay, and then looking at the homelessness prevention programs for 24-25. Apologies, this has a delay. Okay, there we go. So then looking at the homelessness prevention programs, I think as we all know, pretty much all of these programs received higher allocations in 23-24 than would have otherwise been required based on the measure. And in particular, looking at the short-term emergency assistance program, as was pointed out, as well as the protections from tenant harassment programs, those would receive no new program allocation in 24-25. And I'll just highlight, I think Greg touched on this as well, the staffing costs that were allocated and approved in 23-24 for the interim protections from tenant harassment program guidelines. Those funds have not yet been spent. And so that will continue to be available to us in the coming fiscal year. Touching just briefly on sort of the look ahead. Now, again, all of this is based on our currently available revenue estimates and is really subject to further refinement as we get more up-to-date revenue estimates. But based on what we have available to us right now, there are really 4 program categories, as I mentioned, that are going to need to be continued to be trued up in subsequent years. So 2 of these will fully achieve that true up in the fiscal year 25-26. While the adjustments to program stabilization fund and the short-term emergency assistance program will carry over into fiscal year 26-27. Just moving through. So this is really a preview of what that might look like for fiscal year 25-26.
Kelly, can I introduce you or interrupt you for just one moment? Yes. Did anybody have any questions so far on 24-25 that we want to specifically ask about? Okay. Antonio? Hearing no questions? Go, please.
Which program are you, sorry, I just blanked. What program are you talking about to true up? The stabilization. Program stabilization.
But she hasn't gotten to it yet, which
Thank
has 0 in it, which I understand you will explain to her. But so it's helpful that we've kind of gotten it out earlier, because then I'm sure you'll get to it.
Yeah, so basically, I think that's really the highlight on 25-26, looking at the production programs. As a committee member pointed out, multifamily alt models, AC rehab, and homeownership capacity building and operating assistance will be able to be trued up this coming in the 24-25 fiscal year. What will really carry over as an adjustment is the program stabilization fund. And that's really to kind of replenish that fund after kind of the 2 years of not receiving a program allocation. So it would receive a larger allocation in 25-26 of about over $24 million. And then looking at the continued true-up adjustments for the homelessness prevention programs, I think the kind of key takeaways here, again, is another year with no new program allocation for the short-term emergency assistance program, and then some other sort of more minor adjustments to 2 other program categories to kind of complete their true-up process. And then just looking ahead to the 3rd year out, that would be when we would see kind of completion of the true-up process for the program stabilization fund. Again, another year where it would be receiving a slightly higher program allocation to help again replenish that program bucket. And then also completion of the true-up adjustments for the short-term emergency assistance program. So again, a slightly lower, although we would start seeing some program allocation coming into that one in fiscal year 26-27. And again, just to really drive home, this is based on our current revenue estimates, very much subject to change by the time we get to 26-27. I will just close very briefly just to share a little bit of the next steps with you all. Although I think Greg touched on it. After today's meeting, our intention is to transmit the expenditure plan to the mayor and the city council. Upon adoption of the expenditure plan and the program guidelines, which you all will be hearing the first part of shortly here, LAHD will work to prepare a really detailed sort of work plan that will provide additional detail around timing of the program expenditures in the various categories. And that would, of course, be informed by the program guidelines and would additionally be informed by a staffing plan to help us really ramp up implementation of the programs. And with that, that's what I have for you, and we're happy to answer any more questions. Thank you.
When we look at the alternative models for permanent affordable housing, where previous years we were at 41%, and now we're at 43%. Of the numbers, is that true up? Seems like there is something here.
We've never done alt models.
Yes, so the allocation for you're looking at the 24-25 expenditure plan.
Yes.
Yes, so it would receive a larger allocation. That would be about 43.9% of the overall program funds would be provided to the alternative models program, and that's because it was not allocated any funds.
I see. Have to catch up. Oh, but it works.
I'm
looking at it correctly.
Gonna look for other hands. Okay, please, Laura.
Yeah, I had a question about the home ownership, capacity building and operating assistance. So is that because some subcategories in that were spent down? Like, are we within that category? Is there like a true up? Like, for example,
there's no true up required. That program bucket received no program allocation last year. The amount for capacity building, the 300,000, was in administration.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So there is a true up, it's just more money.
Yeah, more money for the program.
Deepika, did you?
Because the budget's hard for me to understand, not because, so you have to re-explain to me the tenant harassment part. I know that there's reasoning in it, I just didn't catch it.
Why it's a reduced allocation?
Or just how, I think Greg was, what basically, if I'm hearing this right, Greg was like, right, we didn't use all the 11 million, but that's a good thing because, you know, it was over budgeted, and so it's gonna fix the true up next year, like you're adjusting the percentages. Is that true?
Well, it's a allocation versus cash out sort of issue. So it was 11 million allocated. And all because of the time it's taking to hire, and 11 million was, what percentage did that put us at?
11.2, 8.1 for the
That's right. So
23-24.
So that was 8%, a little over 8%, which went, you know, way over the 3% that's mandated in the measure. And some of that cash is going out. The cash for the platform, which is the smallest and least sort of expensive of the pillars of the program. The CBO contracts where that scope of work is being developed, the RFP will go out. That money, while committed, right? And so in the budget, like, even though it's cash, there's cash in the House LA fund for that stuff. But that money is committed because that was part of an approved expenditure plan. That will go out this year to pay those contracts once we get the RFP out and the selection happen. And then on the staffing, none of those positions were spent for, right? And so that will simply, that money will pay for the staff going into next year or into 24-25. And so I'm not quite saying good as much as ironically, we won't feel that pain yet with that one. And it should segue nicely
You won't
into
have to
Right, we don't
limit
have to
next
take it.
year's because that money goes into it, and so it'll be.
Even though the
it's
allocation looks
likely
like it.
fully funded.
Yeah.
If the hiring freeze ends.
Yeah, well, although again, these positions at this point are not subject to the hiring freeze. They are subject to,
Right.
bear with me, Commissioner, but they are subject to the prioritized critical hiring process, affectionately known as the PCH committee, who have to approve those positions. And that is a committee made up of the CAO, the CLA, and the mayor's office. They will agendize a meeting. They get these requests from all kinds of departments. And we presume, and we've already submitted for the next meeting, that they'll approve, and then we kick into gear. We've already kicked into gear, going through the civil service, allocation process and all that.
That's perfect, and you'll keep us abreast. Cool. Thank you for letting me
Yeah,
read
totally.
that.
Yeah, no.
So I'll come back to you. So just for clarification, the terms are a little inartful. So it's a budget or it's an allocation plan. Thank you, an allocation plan. This is not cash out at the time.
Right.
This is just, we're setting aside, we're putting money into accounts. Yeah, great. Next.
Which, by the way, the measure really dictates that we have to do that.
If I may.
Sorry.
Madam Chair, can I take a shot at this? So money was allocated for this year. A lot of it didn't get spent. That's going to carry over to next year. If this was actually an expenditure plan, it would have the amount remaining from the end of this fiscal year that was going to get carried over to next year. And then it would add the additional sums expected to be generated for the next year. And that would this is how much will be expended in this category in this 24-25, 25-26. But so this is what you're seeing is how they will allocate funds expected to be collected for the next year. It doesn't address what will be expended next year for the programs where money was allocated, but nothing went out the door because folks didn't get hired, program wasn't up and running, et cetera. I don't know. Does that help, committee member Nipa?
No.
I'm sorry.
No. What you're saying helps,
Okay.
very much helps. But I just don't think that the number
numbers are
is
correct.
correct for the to true up the allocation.
I understand what you're saying.
Allocations that supposedly need to true up the numbers in 24-25. We are not getting the calculation here, but it just doesn't seem.
Yeah, the way to explain it would be to show the total number collected.
Yes.
The percentage, what that amount is, and then compare it. So
That's what I would love to request is, let's think of the columns, right? Maybe for the year 23-24, what was allocated, what was
Like a cash flow.
and the percentage required by the measure, what was actually allocated, right? Which is over or under. I guess I'd love to see this data presented in a different way. So we can compare the years a little easier to see on the eyes. I also want to request page numbers on these presentations as we're flipping through this. This is hard to follow. I also want to request to be printed in color. I need patience. Yeah.
It's already messed up.
Okay, so show your math next time. Show more math and we can talk about the cash flow presentation. Yeah. Did anybody else have any additional questions on this section, this item in the agenda? I'm sorry, were you, Callie, were you done with that portion? Okay, thank you.
Well, just in terms of, I know, like, if we could have discussion on the idea I presented, and like last year we did endorse the expenditure plan. I wonder if we could consider endorsing with an amendment or a recommendation around the program stabilization fund.
We should.
And are people clear on what I'm, yeah, okay, I can do it. So we have a program stabilization fund that every year is supposed to be capitalized until it reaches what, 200 million, I think. And when it reaches 200 million, that's when the alt models and the multifamily affordable housing go from 22.5% allocation to 25%. So like once it's at 200 million, we start fully funding those programs at 25%. But the program stabilization fund, the purpose of it is really to support years when revenue is down and we need to continue funding critical programs, including things like short-term emergency assistance. So given like how much interest there was in short-term emergency assistance, and we didn't even kind of scratch the surface. I mean, it was amazing, but like there's so much more to do there. And then this is kind of imagining the next 2 years, like no funding towards that program. I think we should consider making a recommendation to council around funding that through the program stabilization fund.
And so it would, the allocations.
It's zero, right?
Would flow through. So right? So if you're putting 5% of money into program stabilization funds. Sorry. Then the allocations on the rest would be different.
Yeah.
And it would just flow through all of the
Yeah, all of
programs.
them. Yeah.
So multifamily, okay, so production. And so, okay, the programs whose allocations would decrease, actually all of them. So multifamily, alt models, acquisition rehab, home ownership opportunities, capacity building and operating assistance. But then also the homelessness prevention programs by some proportion. So allocations to income support would go down, eviction defense would go down, tenant outreach would go down.
Yes. I mean, like, yeah, it would be equally, the 5%, you take like less than 1%, right, of these 10 programs.
You take 5% off the top of the total.
Off the top
and then
of it,
you
right, and then you
rebalance everything
allocate it,
else.
but it's still like less than 1% from.
It would be at this revenue level, it would be $7,246,903.
But we want, what you're proposing is to do that, to create the reserve to then fully fund. I mean, it's essentially a reserve, right? To then fully fund the other programs at a later year. So we then, if we funded that 5%, we for sure would not be truing up all of the other categories this year. And it would take another year for us to fully true up because we're taking from some of the other categories only to hold the money in a reserve until it got to a 200 million number. That's not what I heard?
The proposal would be it would like come in and go out to, it's basically a way to true up and still fund the short-term emergency assistance given the need. I'm curious what other folks think of that.
So it's, okay, so I'm sorry, so shave $7 million writ large, put it in the program stabilization funds, and then immediately allocate that to short-term emergency assistance.
Yes.
Because right now we will have 2 years of no short-term emergency rental assistance. It was in 23, it's the last time, right? Even though it was distributed finally. So that would mean year 24 and 25 have had 0. And it's a program that's like built capacity, but also I think we all know one of like the pressing needs, as LHD's numbers kept showing us, right? they had well over 200%, some figure of people that applied, but we only had so many funds.
And I'm just wondering, so why is it zero? Why is no money was allocated to this at all?
Because
over-
we needed
Over the 2
the
years?
cash to shore up
The
the
rest,
budgets
the other stuff?
elsewhere. Yeah. Yes, please, Anne.
Hi, Ann Sewell, Los Angeles Housing Department. The reason it's zero is that it was the most significantly over allocated in this year. So taking $7 million, and by the way, we are already shutting down the infrastructure. So, and it's a really expensive infrastructure, so it wouldn't be $7 million, it would be $7 million minus the cost of the infrastructure. Taking $7 million and putting it into short-term emergency assistance would continue the over allocation. I mean, we'd have to think about, you know, we're taking from programs that were under allocated and putting it into one that is over. And I guess the other thing I would raise is in the measure, the way that short-term emergency assistance is described is not the way that we used it. We used it as emergency rental assistance programs similar to the states and the COVID programs. The one that's described is also provided through the Eviction Defense program and the money that goes out to the community organizations, the legal services providers. So it's not like that isn't still available. So I would just, you know, I mean, staff would have to talk to the city attorney about, you know, our approach to true up, which we did think about using the program stabilization fund to offset things, as you can see, but you know, I'm not sure. Obviously, the committee can do whatever it likes in terms of recommendations. I'm not sure staff would follow you. And you know, it's not that much money to solve the problem, and it would create a math problem going forward that would take probably another year to resolve. So.
And
that's
and alluded to the
all.
administrative problem, because it is a costly, it's costly to do it. It cost us millions of dollars to put out $30 million. And $30 million was to address $450 million in requests. And so if that suddenly becomes $5 or $6 million, spend $1 to $2 million to actually administer on what will, I mean, again, no one doesn't want to do short-term emergency assistance. The bang for the buck, quite frankly, in the context of the demand, is frankly pretty de minimis. Also, to Ann's point, along with the eviction defense settlement money, there's also the income assistance program, which should hopefully get to, you know, some of the most vulnerable folks as well. It's not an easy fix, but again, we, you know, welcome your recommendations. We just want to put those facts on the ground.
I would note that in this year's program, we, you know, of course, took in applications and considered them in tranches of income, so 30% and below, 50%, so on. And because the measure limits short-term emergency assistance to 6 months, we funded everybody in the 30% tranche who was 6 months or under. So there isn't anybody left in that we could fund with the way the measure describes it, which is one of the reasons, as you talked earlier, why we were proposing to address that need through the income support for seniors and people with disability category.
This. It's okay. I looked at this.
That's great, you know, the idea right, that this would be like a city service, but I get that. I also think 7 million, I mean, of course, the hope is that the measure brings in a lot more next year. And that it was more and the operating costs, but yeah, I guess it's something to think about.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we are not taking action. There's no attempt.
We're living like this. Yeah.
We do not have an action item on the agenda. So with that, we'll close the discussion. IIG, would you like to add? Action. Yeah.
That was item 6.
That was item 7. That was item 7.
Oh, yeah.
We are now closing item 7. Make sure, okay, all right, so now we're going to move on to action item number 8. This is an action item. I'm actually gonna hand it straight over to Cecilia. Hold on.
No, you can do that. I'm gonna
Little song
find.
dance.
The vice.
Yeah, you are
chair.
doing.
Oh, got it.
Yeah,
That's right.
Richard
I'm
is doing
sorry.
it.
I went too fast. Sorry, Richard.
No worries, no worries. All right, so the terms for the chair and the vice chair are up for the Oversight Committee. And so we need to do renominations. So in May, we circulated a survey to committee members to secure nominations. I'm going to kind of go through a quick process today, and then we're going to vote on reappointments. So here's my plan. The first is I'm going to announce the results of the survey. Then I'm going to open it up for any additional nominations in the room from committee members. Then I'm going to give the nominees a chance to accept or decline the nominations. And then I'm going to ask folks to put forward a motion to renominate the chair, and then followed by a motion to to nominate a vice chair. So that's the plan. Y'all with me? Okay. All right. So the results of the survey, again, this is non-binding. This is just to get a lay of the land. We had one nominee for chair, and that is Chairperson Coulter. And we had 2 nominees for the vice chair, existing vice chair, Greenlee, as well as committee member Jones for vice chair. So for now, let me open up the floor to see if there are any other additional nominees for the chair. Hearing none. And then seeing if there are any additional nominees for the vice chair. Okay, hearing none. Chairperson Coulter, do you accept your nomination?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Can I solicit a member to put forward a motion?
So moved to nominate Michelle Coulter as the chair.
And roll call.
Chair Coulter. Chair Greenlee.
Yes.
Committee member Chen. Sorry, no, okay, yes, oh, sorry, sorry, committee member Gaeta. Committee member Jones.
Yes.
Committee member Lipa. Committee member Mendez Lemus.
Yes.
Committee member Morales. Committee member Raymond.
Yes.
Committee member Reed.
Yes.
Committee member Sanchez.
Yes.
Committee member Sharma.
Yes.
We have 10 yeses, so Madam Chair, the item passes.
Congrats on that
Congratulations.
reappointment. All right, on to the vice chair. Vice Chair Greenlee, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
All right, committee member Jones, do you accept your nomination? Okay, let's open it up to discussion.
You need a motion first.
Yeah, first we need a motion. Sorry.
All right, motion to nominate Alan Greenlee as the vice chair.
Second.
I'll second. Let's open it up to discussion.
So we need another motion to also nominate. Okay, a motion to nominate Sarita Jones.
But there's already a motion on the table. So
Oh,
procedurally,
see,
and
we have to do the
Yeah.
first one and
Yeah,
then do it
yeah.
after. Oh,
so
procedure.
procedurally, there'll be a nomination. But the city attorney can correct me. There's a motion on the table. It's been moved and seconded. You have to act on that motion. Should that motion fail, then there could be another motion for a different person. or repeatedly, you can, you do whatever you want. And then that until you have a majority voting for the vice chair.
Correct. So can I take the roll for?
Or
Yeah, so
is
it's
that
open
all?
for discussion. Anything.
Well, as the maker of the motion, I just want to say it's been a fast year. It has been a tremendous amount of work. And I'm appreciative of both Michelle and Alan's leadership. So to me, speaking directly about Alan in this motion, happy to continue with you as the vice chair.
Okay, let's vote.
Oh, I'm still chair. I'm still chair.
You call the question?
I said let's vote.
Okay. So now roll call. Take a roll.
Don't start.
Chair Coulter,
Yes.
Vice Chair Greenlee.
Yes.
A committee member Chen,
Yes.
committee member Gaeta, committee member Jones. Oh, no worries.
Yes.
Oh. Committee member Lipa,
Yes.
committee member Mendez Lemus.
Yes.
Committee member Morales. Committee member Raymond.
Yes.
Committee member Reed.
Yes.
Committee member Sanchez.
Yes.
Committee member Sharma.
Yes.
We have 10 votes, so Madam Chair, the item passes.
Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you. All right. That closes item 8. We are now moving on to item 9 on the agenda, which is the approval of permanent program guidelines. I have things to say, so if you will afford me just a little bit of time, I would appreciate that. As the chair of the ad hoc committee, I would very much like to commend the collaborative spirit that has led to the draft guidelines that the IIG will today be presenting for the COC's consideration. I would particularly like to thank the coalition, my fellow COC committee, LAHD, the mayor's office, the city council offices of Bob Blumenfeld and Nithya Raman for making ULA a priority for your staff. Your input has helped shape all facets of the guidelines, from policy to implementation. Innumerable hours and faculties have been spent. The coalition has, of course, worked for years on the initiative's passing and implementation. During the last 5 months, the COC ad hoc has met 18 times with the IIG and the esteemed staff of LAHD. The volume of subject matter expertise incorporated into these guidelines is remarkable. I want to elevate the commitment of committee members who have spent so much time together recently. Thank you, committee members Debbie Chen, Jennifer Gaeta, Elda Mendez Lemus, Alma Morales, Laura Raymond, and Deepika Sharma. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the brain trust at LAHD, Greg Good, Edwin Sun, and Callie Hardy. Thank you. And the IIG staff, who has taken on a scope of work that I didn't believe Alan and I knew we needed. Thank you. Cecilia, Winnie, Abigail, Richard, and Samantha, thank you all. And with this agenda item, we are proud to begin approving 10 sets of guidelines total, 3 today and 7 in 2 weeks. With that, I will now turn it over to Cecilia on the IIG team to walk us through the process for this action item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All right. So I just want to give you a game plan of how we hope to proceed. We're going to present 3 very important guidelines today. It's going to be the protection from tenant harassment, eviction defense, and tenant outreach and education. How we propose to do this is to first do a very brief presentation, overview of the guideline. We're going to take them one at a time. So we'll talk about summarizing some key points, the objectives, just very key points. We know that you all have read these in advance. We know you're very diligent members, but we also know that there's a lot in this packet. So what we would like to do is we'll do this 5-minute presentation, truly no more than 5 minutes as an overview. Then we'll give you 5 minutes essentially to look over the guidelines to refresh your recollection of what's really in them. Because they're interrelated, it can get confusing, so we want to give you 5 minutes, literally reading time, and to prepare any questions you might have or comments you may want to make. At the conclusion of that 5-minute quiet time, we would then open it back up to questions for us, for LAHD, clarifying anything in the guidelines that you may have a concern about. So maybe about 5 minutes of questions, and then the chair will entertain a motion. Assuming we have a second on that motion, then we will use that motion on the floor to commence discussion, a fulsome discussion of the motion. Then we'll act on that motion and then move on. So that's our game plan, and we're going to take them each in turn. Any questions on the process? Okay, cool. Okay, before we dive into the specifics of the first one, we want to provide a little bit of framing and context about the guidelines. The guidelines were developed not to be super ultra specific, but rather, to quote the great Greg Good, to be evergreen, to be guidance. So not entirely prescriptive, but guidance on how the program should be implemented, but with enough wiggle room that adjustments can be made from year to year without having to come in and amend the guidelines on an annual basis. So there are directives, but they're not super prescriptive. So you'll see that. I imagine you've noticed that. There are sections that have a lot of similarities in content, but there are program-specific differences. That's why we're giving those 5 minutes to look, because they're interrelated, these particular programs, obviously. And lastly, these guidelines are not meant to be NOFAs, or Notice of Funding Availability. That's where a lot of specificity comes in when you do program implementation. So it's the guidance. In some cases, it talks about contracts that will be procured, and that procurement process will probably be quite prescriptive about what we're looking for bidders to propose, right? What LHD is looking for bidders to propose. But that's not the level of specificity for the guidelines. That's it. Any questions on that, on the distinction between guidelines and, say, NOFAs or procurement documents? Okay, I just want to look to, yeah, LAHD, any comments?
So I apologize for being late. I don't know if you covered this already, but questions have been raised by members and members of the city attorney's office recently about some of the ethics discussions that we had in the very early things about this group is a little different than some of our commissions in that people who actually work in the field and know things about the field sit on it, which also leads to conflicts. So when I read these, I usually tried to look at, could somebody who was going to apply for the programs still look at these guidelines, and it might say, for instance, a developer should have experience. It doesn't say what gets you the points for that experience, like, this many points, whatever, or a contractor should have, So I think we're going to have a separate discussion, try to get Renee Stottle to come back and talk about the ethics things again separately to assure some people who are concerned. But that's one of the reasons why we drew that distinction, is that this should not create a uncomfortable feeling of I'm voting on things that will either benefit or not benefit my organization.
What was the distinction, the specific distinction?
It says you need experience, or you need, qualifications. It doesn't say how they will be weighted or judged, and, it doesn't give you the path to win that competition.
Sorry, hi. Hi, Ann, thanks for those comments. We did have discussions at the city attorney's office yesterday about the issue that Ann mentioned, and we went over the agenda, and there is going to be a recusal for one of the items by a committee member, Mendes Limas, because her yeah, Anshan. I'm sorry about that. Both of them, because their employer may consider seeking financing as a part of the tenant outreach and education portion of program. So she will be recusing herself from both the discussion and the voting for that particular matter.
Who's she?
Oh,
Hilda and Debbie.
yes, both of them, right. And we gave them the forms to complete, which they already did, and then they'll leave the room during the discussion and during the voting of that particular matter, or those particular matters. So they can't be here for the discussion or the voting.
Is now the time to ask? So based on, General Manager Sewell's comment about, how the guidelines don't necessarily provide the pathway to, securing funding, should we still be considering recusal?
I suggest that out of an abundance of caution, as people say, you do until you've had a chance to both ask for a personal opinion from Renee, if you need one, and that we ask her to come and talk to everybody at once.
Right, and I did talk to Renee about this specifically yesterday.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
And that doesn't affect quorum?
It shouldn't, because the only non-voting member is Mr. Saya, and then I think you still have 9 people if he's not here, or 11, actually 10. Yes, so and you only need 7, so you're good.
Okay. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Mei.
You're welcome.
All right. Any other points before we jump in? Okay, let's do it. All right, the first set of guidelines we're going to discuss is the protections from tenant harassment, and who's running the show. There we go. Item 9A, protections from tenant harassment. So quickly on the overview, the ordinance, as you have read, directs that 3% of the House LA funds go to this program, the tenant harassment programs. The objective here is to establish protocols, guidelines, expectations for harassment investigations, outreach and education to tenants and landlords, and a mechanism for enforcing the city's tenant anti-harassment ordinance, what folks often refer to as Tahoe. Those who are eligible for this program are individual tenants and households. Eligible activities include monitoring and enforcement, education and support. Eligible providers are legal service providers and nonprofit organizations. What we would like to do is to invite you to spend about 5 minutes looking over the packet. I'll set a little timer on my phone, and then we'll come back, and then if you have any questions of staff, of us or others, we'll have those about 5 minutes of questions, and then we'll entertain a motion. And if folks don't need the full 5 minutes, we can jump in, but I've got the timer going. Okay, folks, anybody else reading or are we ready to move forward? Just looking around? Okay. All right, committee members. Okay, so our 5 minutes of reading is over.
Our 5 minutes of reading is over.
Well, yeah.
So
So, next order is, are there any questions regarding the content of the draft guidelines?
Yeah, I don't know if I have in general when I read it.
Yeah. Microphone,
Oh,
committee member. Yeah.
it isn't just far away from the mic. Just in general, and I'm not sure even if it fits, but I just kind of, it came to mind that we are not discussing, or we are not talking about any unintended consequences of maybe certain tenants taking advantage of certain things. I mean, we are always talking about, you know, we're always talking about, about what's mostly is the problem, obviously. But we are not in any place, and I don't know whether there is a place for this in this, is to talk about unintended consequences where some tenants take advantage of issues.
That is not addressed in these guidelines.
I understand. I'm saying,
and-
so that was that's why I'm saying that
general.
was a general issue that I don't know whether it's needed to be done, how sensitive it is, but it is, but we know that there are issues. It's not always one-sided. It's mostly one-sided, but it's not always one-sided. So I'm just putting it on the table.
Really, and this is really intended to be questions, because then we'll entertain a motion and then a discussion on the item. Any other questions or comments before? Okay, so Madam Chair, do you want to call for a motion?
do we have a motion?
We do. I move to approve as is with no amendments, the tenant harassment guidelines. I move to approve the ULA tenant harassment guidelines as proposed and direct LHD to transmit the recommended program guidelines to the city council for consideration.
Do we have a second?
Second. Jones. That was Jones. Sorry. So then procedurally, is there a discussion on the motion? Prior to taking it, are there any discussion items?
So mine was.
Yes.
I'm moving it back to the discussion. And yeah.
Let's see if there's anybody else.
Any additional discussion on the motion?
Okay, so I'll do the roll call. Chair Coulter,
Yes.
Vice Chair Greenlee,
Yes.
Committee Member Chen,
Yes.
Committee Member Gaeta, Committee Member Jones.
Yes.
Committee Member Lipa, Committee Member Mendez Lemus,
Yes.
Committee Member Morales, Committee Member Raymond.
Yes.
Committee Member Reed,
Yes.
Committee Member Sanchez.
Yes.
Committee Member Sharma. That's 10 yeses, so Madam Chair, the item passes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that.
Again, the motion was made by Committee Member Sharma and seconded by Committee Member Jones. Sorry, I have to repeat because folks can't see you down there. Okay. That's number one. You've just approved your first set of guidelines. Okay. Our idiot. Okay, next up is the Eviction Defense and Prevention Program Guidelines. Again, we'll put up a slide, just give you an overview of the program. The ordinance directed that 10% of the House LA funds go to the Eviction Defense and Prevention Program, providing a right to counsel and legal services to lower income households facing eviction. The objective of the program is to offer full scope and limited scope services of legal support to these targeted populations. Those who are eligible participants include individual tenants and households at or below 80% of the area median income that do not reside in the same dwelling as the landlord. The activities that are eligible to be conducted under this program include legal services, rental assistance, filing disputes, and operating clinics and workshops. Providers include designated legal service providers. So that's a very general overview. I'm gonna then go ahead and give folks any questions on this, or I can give folks 5 minutes to take a look at it. Okay. Go.
Do people need more time?
Nope. Okay. This time, are there any questions that folks have about the substance of the guidelines? Specific questions or need for clarification? This had quite a bit more detail than the previous one. It outlines the scope of the legal services that are to be provided, data collection. It talks about the limited legal scope, what are those services? Funding priorities. And contractual services. Okay, if there aren't any questions, then, Madam Chair.
Do we have a motion to approve?
We do. I move to approve as is with no amendments, the ULA Eviction Defense Program Guidelines as proposed and direct LHD to transmit the recommended program guidelines to the City Council for consideration.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Debbie?
Okay, so the mover was Sharma, second by Chen. Okay, any discussion on the motion?
I have the same comment. So you can just, I really do. I don't want to, I'm okay with the, with the motion, but I do think that something that we should do, we should take something into consideration in the future.
Okay, since there does not seem to be any discussion, City Attorney, call the roll, please.
Yes, so Chair Coulter.
Yes.
Vice Chair Greenlee.
Yes.
Committee Member Chen,
Yes.
Committee Member Gaeta, Committee Member Jones.
Yes.
Committee Member Lipa, Committee Member Mendez Limas,
Yes.
Committee Member Morales, Committee Member Raymond,
Yes.
Committee Member Reed,
Yes.
Committee Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Committee Member Sharma.
Yes.
That's 10 yeses. So Madam Chair, the item passes.
Okay. And that was meeting time. Okay, we'll take a slight pause.
We're gonna have the recusal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at this time, Committee Member Chen and Mendez Limas are gonna vacate exit the room so we can discuss and vote on the tenant outreach and education.
And we're gonna
portion.
note that for the record in the minutes.
We'll talk about it.
Like, we're coming back.
I'll come get you when it's over.
I don't know.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So now let's, so it's been noted that the two committee members, Committee Member Chen and Mendez Limas have left the room. We'll take up item 9C, tenant outreach and education. Just a very brief overview. In this the ordinance directs that 2% of the House LA funds are allocated for tenant outreach and education. The goal of this program is to ensure the housing stability for lower income households at the risk of displacement from their homes and communities through proactive homelessness prevention and eviction prevention efforts. Eligible participants include individual tenants and households, as well as tenant navigation services for households at or below 80% area median income. The activities that would be funded include public awareness, outreach, education, and tenant navigation of services. Eligible providers include LA Housing Department and contracted nonprofit entities that would administer the services. We can give you some time to review them. Again, this has actually quite a bit of detail in it. So we'll give folks a few minutes to review and note any questions that they might have. I also this is the last step, but I'll also note that metrics are proposed for a data collection are proposed in each of these guidelines that are going to be important for us as we measure the effectiveness of the program. Okay, are there any committee members that need additional time to review the items? Okay, with that, any questions about specifics in the draft ordinance, the draft guidelines? Okay, Madam Chair.
Do I have a motion?
Yes. I move to approve the ULA Tenant Outreach and Education Program Guidelines as proposed and direct LHD to transmit the recommended program guidelines to the City Council for consideration.
Do we have a second? And call for discussion?
Yeah, motion by Raymond, second by Sanchez. Okay.
Call for discussion?
I just wanted to make a comment saying that if we could take into account families who are first gen, or have first gen children technically, and they act as the head of the household, so possibly doing outreach, through schools, so that if their parents aren't like up to date on anything in the city, but their kids are, because their kids handle their bills and stuff, that like at school you give out a paper to like say it's like a low income school. Like I went to a low income school, LA High. Like I wasn't necessarily low income, but a good amount of students there were. So like just give out pamphlets at those schools. Like Beverly Hills probably doesn't need it, but LA High might, Santee might, Hamilton, so on and so forth. So like those schools, like reaching out to those schools and giving them like pamphlets or something, so that students there who know that their family is struggling, or so on and so forth, can give out to people who need it.
That's great. Thank you. Additional discussion items?
Okay. And just LHD, I don't know if you had any comments on that idea.
Sounds like a good idea.
Great.
All right. I am calling for a vote.
Yes, Chair Coulter,
Yes.
Vice Chair Greenlee,
Yes.
Committee Member Gaeta, Committee Member Jones,
Yes.
Committee Member Lipa,
Yeah.
Committee Member Morales, Committee Member Raymond,
Yes.
Committee Member Reed, Committee Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Committee Member Sharma. Thank you. That's a vote of 8 yeses, so Madam Chair, the item passes.
Thank you for that third vote today, third program guidelines. We have 15% of the expenditure plan covered. Thank you.
All right. So now on number 10.
That closes item number 9, or item number 10 is item, we'll now talk about future meeting and agenda items. I want to first remind everybody that our next meeting is in 2 weeks. Thursday, June 27th at 2:30, and we will continue our discussion of the guidelines. We'll have the balance of guidelines, the other 85% of the expenditure plan to hopefully vote and approve next week. So it's important that you all are able to attend. With that, I will leave it open for future agenda items. Hearing no future agenda items, I think we can close item 10, which leaves us to item 11, adjournment. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you.